You know, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a man of just extraordinary patience. I mean, think about it. He endured unimaginable personal loss, losing his parents at such a young age, his beloved wife, 6 of his children during his own lifetime, and he handled it all with this profound composure and dignity. He really wasn't someone who was easily moved to tears, but the authenticated sources tell us about these specific, rare moments when he did weep. And one of those moments? It was when he looked into the future. Not his own future, but the future of his ummah, his people. He saw the trials, the tests, the sheer confusion that would come crashing down on us. He wept for that, and then he left us with a warning that is so urgently detailed, it honestly feels like a weather forecast for the exact storm we are standing in right now. So welcome to this explainer. Today we aren't just looking at abstract theology. We're unpacking a practical, literal survival guide for the era of fitna that we are currently living in.
Let's just quickly pull up our survival manual index here. We'll be covering the storm of fitna, the categories of modern trials, how faith is actually destroyed, the shields of protection you can use, and finally, the ultimate reward. Let's get right into it.
Starting with Section 1, the storm of fitna, and really understanding this threat.
So the word fitna itself is incredibly multidimensional. If we look at it linguistically, it actually comes from the Arabic root word for the process of testing gold or silver in a fire, literally burning away the impurities to reveal what's genuinely real underneath. So fitna isn't just a simple pass or fail test. It's this heavy combination of trial, civil strife, temptation, and just deep disorientation. And in the end times, these 4 dimensions don't just happen one by one, they arrive all together. They test our faith in the exact same way that fire tests the absolute purity of gold.
The prophet used some incredibly evocative imagery to describe this. He said, "I looked and saw fires and afflictions, like patches of dark night that will come to you." Now think about ordinary darkness. When it's just dark out, you know you can't see, right? So you move carefully, you're cautious. But he warned that these patches of dark night represent these successive trials where people confidently walk down the completely wrong path, entirely unaware that they're totally lost. The fitna actually feels right to them. It looks justified. It even uses the language of righteousness, all while leading people completely away from the truth.
He also described them as coming like waves of the sea, meaning these trials arrive in this relentless succession. They literally don't give you time to fully catch your breath and recover before the next wave just crashes into you. And the consequence of this relentless erosion is profound. The prophet described how a person might literally wake up as a believer, but then go to sleep as a disbeliever, selling their deen, their entire faith, for a mere fraction of worldly gain. It's usually not this dramatic, sudden apostasy, It's destruction through tiny, almost unnoticeable little compromises.
Which brings us to Section 2, categories of modern trials, or the battlefields.
Scholars have actually categorized fitna into distinct types, and this clinical taxonomy maps out the 5 active categories that are basically attacking us simultaneously today. First, we have shawawat, which is the pull of physical desires and the normalization of the forbidden. Then there's shubahat, the intellectual confusion and false arguments that slowly erode faith right at its root. Then we have harb, civil conflicts and outright violence. Dunya, the intense seduction of material wealth. And finally, ikhtilaf, which is the sectarianism and severe division that just destroys our collective strength. Let's look a little closer at a couple of the most pervasive ones we face today.
First up, the fitna of wealth and power. Now, wealth itself isn't the test. The test is the insatiable love for it. The prophet warned of a time when people would be given wealth, but it's just never enough for them. It becomes this hyper-competitive accumulation that totally corrupts you. And right alongside that is the temptation of power. The fitna here happens when leaders, and this could be a leader of a household, a local community, or an entire nation, forget that their authority is an amana. It's a profound trust that they'll eventually have to answer for. But instead, they start treating their power like a personal possession.
And then, of course, we have the ultimate modern battlefield, the fitna of social media. The prophet explicitly warned about the immense dangers of the tongue, the absolutely destructive nature of upward comparison, the creeping corruption of performative worship, what we call riyah, and the extreme danger of eloquent hypocrites leading people astray. Honestly, we can draw a direct, straight line from those ancient warnings right to today's social media platforms. These algorithms are perfectly designed to exploit our deepest psychological vulnerabilities. They literally reward outrage as a core identity, and they amplify partial knowledge just to create mass confusion. It's wild.
Moving right along to Section 3, how faith is destroyed, mapping out the actual mechanism.
So, the Prophet described trials being presented to the human heart kind of like a reed mat being woven, just stick by stick by stick. Every single time a heart absorbs a trial, every small compromise, every time a sin gets normalized, a tiny black dot is placed right on it. And eventually, over time, the heart turns into what he called an upside-down black vessel. It can't recognize good, it can't reject evil, it just blindly follows its base desires. But conversely, a heart that actively rejects these trials through consistent obedience builds a white mark. Eventually, it becomes like a smooth white stone, completely resilient, practically armed with built-in antibodies against the fitna.
Now let's pivot over to Section 4, Shields of Protection. These are our real-world survival tactics.
These 6 shields we're looking at, they aren't just passive concepts. They are a highly proactive arsenal. Number 1, regular recitation of the Quran. That's what builds that resilient white stone quality we just talked about. 2, the 5 daily prayers. These act as a recurring reset, a daily anchor against the constant, overwhelming noise and distraction of the world. 3, righteous company, which gives you those armored friendships you need to stay grounded. 4, seeking knowledge, but specifically through verified, authenticated chains, so you're protected from eloquent influencers. 5, isolation. Sometimes strategic withdrawal from toxic environments is just absolutely necessary. And 6, making daily prophetic du'as, literally seeking divine refuge from trials, both the hidden ones and the obvious ones.
Interestingly, there is actually a reversed hierarchy of action when you're dealing with these specific trials. The Prophet explicitly advised us on how to physically and mentally posture ourselves during these times. Running toward the fitna, that's the absolute worst thing you can do. Walking toward it is bad. Standing is better, sure, but sitting, like stepping back entirely, that is the absolute best. It teaches us this really profound wisdom in an era of constant manufactured outrage and this relentless pressure to take a side on literally every issue. The absolute best response is very often stillness, silence, and just taking shelter.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the ultimate reward, or holding the hot coals.
This whole thing really comes down to the number 50. The Prophet described holding onto your faith in the end times as being exactly like holding on to hot coals. Think about that for a second. It burns. The social cost is incredibly high. Your immediate instinct is just to drop them, to stop the pain. But, and this is incredible, he promised that the reward for the person who actually holds firm in the middle of all this isolation and difficulty is equivalent to the reward of 50 of his own companions. 50. The very people who sacrificed literally everything in the earliest days of the faith.
It's a simple equation, really. When the cost of holding firm is at its absolute highest, the reward is proportionally the greatest. I want you to remember that you are not alone in this storm. Every single believer who ever lived through an era of fitna felt the exact same immense pressure that you feel right now today. So make that dua for steadfastness, actively guard your heart using the shields we laid out today, and ultimately, you have to ask yourself, when the fire burns and the waves crash, how will you choose to navigate the trials ahead? Will you drop the coals, or will you secure your reward?